I stepped off the creaky bus just as dusk settled over the remote village in Owsley County, Kentucky, the place I once called home. My duffel bag hung heavy over one shoulder, a single rolling suitcase rattling behind me on the uneven gravel. I trudged along the winding dirt path toward the old family cabin, nestled deep in a holler where the mountains loomed dark against the sky. Each step felt surreal. 32 months in Northeast Syria, the chaos, sand, and silence after explosions felt farther away than the rocky trails now crunching beneath my boots. Before you continue with the story, where in the world are you listening? Subscribe to the channel to see what happens next. When I reached the sagging gate to our yard, something in my chest tightened. The cabin stood in ghostly stillness. No light glowed from the porch, weeds choked the garden patch, and vines curled over the splintered fence posts. The front door was shut tight, its hinges rusted from years of mountain damp. "Mom, Dad," I called, my voice low, uncertain, swallowed by the rustle of pines. No answer. I circled to the side door, the one that always warped in the humid summers. It groaned open without a fight. Inside, everything was frozen. The living room sat untouched, dust blanketing the worn couch. Picture frames tilted on the mantel, and a thin grime coated the kitchen table. Plates were missing from the shelves, drawers left half open like someone had fled in a hurry. My chest tightened. I had no idea that during my deployment, my parents had lost the cabin to financial strain and slipped away months ago. Letters had gone unanswered, calls faded into static, and now I was home. But home was just an empty shell. I dropped my bag by the door and stepped out into the yard. The wind swept down from the ridges, carrying a sharp chill and a silence that felt wrong, like the mountains were holding their breath. Just as I turned to go back inside, I heard it. A faint scratch, then a low, broken whimper. I froze. The sound came from the edge of the clearing, where an old wooden kennel sagged under years of neglect, half hidden by overgrown brush. I moved slowly, pulling the flashlight from my backpack, its beam cutting through the gathering dark. There, in the farthest corner of the kennel, a dog lay curled against the rotted boards. Its body was skeletal, fur patchy, skin clinging to bone. It shuddered with each shallow breath, one hind leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Its eyes, pale and filmy, locked onto mine. My first instinct was to turn away. It looked wild, nearly gone. But then my flashlight glinted on something around its neck. A collar, rusted and cracked, with one word barely legible under the dirt. Ziggy. The world seemed to stop. Ziggy, the German shepherd I'd raised from a pup. The dog I'd trained, loved and whispered to before deployment, promising, "I'll come back for you." A neighbor down the holler had sworn to look after him, and I'd trusted him. Now that same dog lay dying in the mud, forgotten by everyone but me. I dropped to my knees. "Ziggy, oh God." He stirred, slow and painful. Ziggy dragged himself forward an inch, then another, until his snout brushed the toe of my boot. He pressed his head against it, giving a single weak wag of his tail before collapsing. Tears blurred my vision, scattering the flashlight's glow as I reached out and gathered him into my arms. He was light, far too light. His breath was shallow, his heartbeat faint. I stood, clutching Ziggy to my chest, my voice breaking through gritted teeth. "I left you, and you waited for me. You waited all this time." I stumbled through the dark trails, Ziggy's frail body cradled against me. My boots slipped on loose gravel, each step a plea for him to hold on. The dim glow of distant cabins flickered through the trees as I dialed the emergency vet with trembling hands, my voice cracking as I begged them to be ready. A pickup truck rumbled past, its driver leaning out. "You okay, son?" he called, his voice rough with mountain twang. I shook my head, unable to stop, terrified that even a second's pause would steal Ziggy's last breaths. My arms ached, my lungs burned, but I kept running, whispering between gasps. We're almost there, buddy. Don't give up. Far off, the clinic's faint light shone through the valley, a lifeline in the night, and I pushed forward. My world narrowed to the dog who'd never stopped believing I'd come back. The fluorescent lights in the emergency veterinary clinic buzzed faintly overhead as I stood in the corner, arms crossed tightly, staring through the glass window into the operating room. Ziggy lay on a metal table, surrounded by a team of professionals moving with urgent precision. One of the vets, a woman with tired eyes and gentle hands, stepped into the hallway to speak with me. "He has less than 12 hours unless we act now," she said. "Severe malnutrition, dehydration, organ stress, infection. We can try, but it won't be cheap, and there are no guarantees." I didn't hesitate. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my military ID and bank card, and signed the consent form with a firm stroke. Every cent I had saved from my last tour, meant for a truck or a new start, would now go toward saving the only soul that had waited for me. Back at the cabin, the silence was deafening. I left the lights off, lit a single lamp in the living room, and started cleaning. I scrubbed the floors, swept dust from the furniture, washed windows fogged with mountain mist. It was nearly dawn when I stopped in the middle of the room. I laid down a thick blanket, folded towels, and an old pillow. It would be Ziggy's bed. I filled a stainless steel bowl with cold water and set it beside a second one in the kitchen. I defrosted beef, chopped carrots and rice, and simmered everything slowly into a stew. Every movement was deliberate, quiet, heavy with guilt and hope. The next evening, the clinic called. Ziggy had made it through surgery. I brought him home, wrapped in a thermal blanket, an IV port still taped to his front leg, a small shaved patch over a stitched wound. He couldn't walk, barely lifted his head, but he was alive. I laid him on the bedding I'd prepared and knelt beside him. "We're here now," I whispered. "This is home again." A few nights later, panic gripped me. Ziggy's breathing turned ragged, shallow gasps that barely moved his chest. His eyes fluttered, half open, unfocused. I grabbed my phone, fumbling, and called the vet. "It could be an infection flare-up," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "Keep him warm. Watch him till morning. If he worsens, bring him in." I couldn't lose him. Not now. Not after everything. I sat cross-legged on the floor, Ziggy's head in my lap, and talked to him through the night. I told him about the time we camped by the lake, how he'd chased fireflies until he collapsed, panting, beside me. My voice shook, but I kept going, as if my words could tether him to life. By dawn, his breathing steadied and his eyes met mine again. I buried my face in his fur, whispering, "You're still here, buddy. Thank you." That night carved something permanent in me, a fear I'd never shake, but also a gratitude that grew deeper with every day he fought to stay. Each day was a test of patience and endurance. I set alarms to feed Ziggy every 4 hours, measured his water intake, and kept a journal of his recovery. I sat with him for hours, speaking softly, playing quiet classical music to drown out the emptiness. When he trembled, I opened the windows to let sunlight warm the space. I learned how to gently massage his muscles, encouraging blood flow. Every time he lifted his head, I celebrated it like a victory. One afternoon, while rinsing Ziggy's water bowl, the kitchen dissolved around me. I was back in Syria, sand in my throat, the air thick with smoke. A blast echoed in my ears, and I saw Ramirez, my squad mate, crumple to the ground, his laugh silenced forever. My hand shook, the bowl slipping from my grip, shattering on the floor. I sank against the counter, chest tight, vision blurring. Then I felt it, a soft nudge. Ziggy, still weak, had dragged himself from his bed, his nose pressing into my palm. His eyes, clearer now than days before, held mine. The desert faded, and I was back, the hum of the fridge grounding me. "You always know, don't you?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I slid to the floor beside him, my hand resting on his back, letting his steady heartbeat pull me out of the past. Then came the night my past broke through. It started like it always did. In the quiet, a memory, a sound, a flash. I bolted upright from the couch, drenched in sweat, heart pounding as I gasped for air. My chest felt tight, vision blurred, hands clawing at my shirt. Then, movement. Ziggy, dragging his weak body across the floor, pulled himself into the room. I barely noticed until I felt a gentle nudge against my chest. He rested his head there, his breath slow and steady, a low whine vibrating through his throat, grounding me in the moment, anchoring me in something real. I wrapped my arms around him, pulled him close, forehead pressed to fur. I came back for you, I whispered, voice cracking. But maybe you came back for me too? The room fell still again, but this time it wasn't empty. The days grew longer, and so did Ziggy's strength. With each passing morning, he seemed to reclaim a little more of the life he'd nearly lost. What started as weak attempts to lift his head turned into dragging himself to the food bowl. Then, one crisp morning, he stood, shaky, unsteady, but on all fours. I watched with wide eyes, frozen in place, afraid that if I moved, the moment would vanish. Ziggy took one slow step, then another, then collapsed into the blanket. But he wagged his tail just once, and that was enough to bring tears to my eyes. Recovery wasn't just Ziggy's journey, it was mine too. Since coming home, I'd been relying on sleeping pills and occasional numbing habits to dull the constant hum of past trauma. But with Ziggy needing me fully, I stopped taking the pills. I replaced restless nights with walks in the yard, feeding schedules, and new purpose. I began preparing real meals, eating with Ziggy by my side. By the third week, I started waking up early to stretch, to move, to breathe beside my dog. We trained together, Ziggy learning to walk again, me learning how to live again. Our days found rhythm. Morning walks as the fog lifted from the grass. Evenings spent side by side on the porch steps, bathed in orange light, the wind brushing gently past us. Neither of us spoke, of course, but the silence was no longer something to fear. It was shared. One evening, I snapped a photo, Ziggy's head resting on my knee, the sun painting us gold. On a whim, I logged into the old Facebook group for military veterans, a place I hadn't visited since deployment. I uploaded the photo and wrote, "He waited for me." I don't know how, but he did, and somehow, he's helping me come back too. I almost didn't hit post, but I did. That night, a message pinged from Mike, a guy from my unit I hadn't spoken to in years. "Saw your post, Gomez. You okay?" he wrote. I hesitated, then typed back, "Getting there. Ziggy's pulling me through." We talked past midnight about sleepless nights, the weight of memories, the way guilt lingers like dust you can't sweep away. Mike admitted he was struggling too, living alone, jumping at every loud noise. I told him how Ziggy's nudges kept me grounded, how feeding him gave me a reason to get up. "Maybe I should get a dog," Mike said, half joking. "Do it," I replied. "They see things we can't." When we signed off, I felt lighter, like I'd given something back, even if it was just a spark of hope. Ziggy, curled up beside me, seemed to sense it, his tail giving a lazy thump. The response was like a tidal wave. Within hours, the post had hundreds of likes. Comments poured in. Fellow soldiers shared their stories, their dogs, their pain. Messages came from strangers, from widows of veterans, from former medics and nurses who remembered soldiers like me. They thanked me. They thanked Ziggy. Then came a private message, a short one. "I was going to end my life tonight. Then I read your story. Your dog saved more than you think." I read it 3 times, staring at the screen in stunned silence. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. I blinked, swallowed, and leaned back in my chair. Ziggy, sensing the shift in my energy, got up slowly and padded over. He climbed gently into my lap, still too big for it, and laid his head squarely on my chest. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him close. My eyes burned, but I let the tears fall. Not out of grief this time, but out of something unfamiliar, something healing. I pressed my cheek into his fur and whispered, "We're doing it, buddy. We're actually doing it." In that golden silence we sat together, two souls who had once been lost, now leading others home. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the park as Ziggy and I strolled along the winding path. It had become part of our new routine, an hour outside every day, surrounded by the laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, and the normalcy I once thought I'd never feel again. Ziggy walked proudly by my side, still bearing a slight limp, but moving with strength and purpose that defied the memory of the frail dog I'd found just weeks ago. We neared the playground where families gathered. Toddlers ran through the grass, the air filled with squeals of joy. I smiled faintly. Ziggy's ears twitched at the sound of children, his tail swaying gently behind him. Then it happened. A loud shout pierced the calm, followed by a flurry of motion. A large dog, muscular, wild-eyed, its leash trailing behind, had broken free from its owner and was barreling toward a little girl standing alone near the edge of the play area. She froze, eyes wide, unable to scream. Chaos erupted. Parents shouted, people ran. I turned instinctively, my eyes locking on the incoming danger. I opened my mouth to call out, but before a word left my lips, Ziggy moved, like a switch had been flipped inside him. He surged forward, body low, fast, every ounce of his training and protective instinct igniting at once. I yelled his name, but he was already a blur across the grass. He reached the girl just as the other dog lunged. Ziggy threw himself into its path, intercepting the attack midair. The two animals collided with a vicious snarl. Ziggy growled, bit, clawed, locked onto the dog's scruff, and held it back with all the strength his wounded body could muster. I sprinted forward, heart pounding in my chest. By the time I reached them, Ziggy was still holding the other dog down, blood staining the fur around his neck and shoulder. The little girl was crying, but untouched, scooped into her mother's arms and pulled to safety. I dove between the snarling chaos, gripping Ziggy's collar, shouting for help. Other adults joined in, pulling the aggressive dog away. It took several minutes to separate them. When it was over, the ground was torn, grass ripped, blood soaked into the dirt. Ziggy lay panting, his body trembling, his ear torn, and one leg twisted unnaturally beneath him. No, no, no. I dropped to my knees, cradling his battered body in my arms. Blood smeared my hands, my shirt, but I didn't care. You're okay, buddy. Stay with me. You did good. You did so good. Ziggy blinked slowly, his chest rising and falling with shallow, labored breaths. A few days later, a knock at my door startled me. It was the girl's mother, her eyes red but soft with gratitude. Her name's Hannah, she said, clutching a small drawing, a child's sketch of a black and tan dog with a glowing halo. She hasn't stopped talking about Ziggy. She's scared at night, but she says she feels safe knowing he's out there. Her voice cracked, and I swallowed hard, unsure what to say. Can she see him when he's better? She asked. I glanced at Ziggy, asleep on his blanket, his bandages fresh. Yeah, I said quietly. I'd like that. She nodded, pressing the drawing into my hands. Thank you, she whispered, and I felt something shift inside me, a sense that Ziggy's courage had rippled beyond that moment in the park, touching lives I'd never imagined. The sound of sirens approached in the distance. Someone had called animal emergency. I pressed my face into Ziggy's fur, my voice breaking. You saved her, like you saved me, I whispered, tears falling freely onto his blood-matted coat. Ziggy didn't respond, but his tail twitched once, just once, against my arm before going still. In that moment, surrounded by chaos, sirens, and strangers, I held the dog who had waited for me through war and time, who had just given everything to protect again. As the sirens grew louder, a man pushed through the crowd, red-faced, shouting. "Your dog started it," he yelled, pointing at Ziggy, who lay trembling in my arms. My jaw tightened. "He saved a kid," I said, voice low, steady, though anger burned in my chest. "Yours was out of control." He stepped closer, but a park ranger intervened, asking for witnesses. I explained what happened, my words clipped, while cradling Ziggy. The video circulating on phones backed me up, showing Ziggy's leap to protect Hannah. The man backed off, muttering, but the accusation stung. Later, an animal control officer called to confirm Ziggy wouldn't face trouble, but the encounter left me shaken, wondering how many battles we'd still have to fight. I stroked Ziggy's head, promising, "No one's taking you from me." The video was shaky, taken by a bystander's phone, but it captured everything: the frantic screams, the charging dog, Ziggy's leap, and the moment he threw himself between a terrified little girl and danger. It captured blood, chaos, and my trembling hands cradling my injured companion. Within hours, the clip went viral. The media called it the Backyard Guardian story. News stations ran the footage on every major network. Headlines read, "Neglected dog becomes hero. Veteran's dog saves child from forgotten to fearless." Within days, Ziggy's and my faces were on every screen in America. The world wanted to know more, not about a soldier or a war, but about the bond that had survived both. Interviews poured in, morning shows, veteran organizations, animal rescue groups. I kept my answers simple, heartfelt, never trying to make myself the hero. "I didn't rescue Ziggy," I said over and over. "He rescued everything I had left." I told the story of how I found him in the backyard, starving and silent, how I almost walked away, how that broken dog brought me back to life, piece by piece. Every time I spoke, I looked at Ziggy with the same gratitude in my eyes, a look that needed no translation. Then came the invitation from the American Hero Dog Awards. They wanted to honor Ziggy with the highest national recognition for service animals, Hero Dog of the Year. The ceremony would be in Florida City. I hesitated, unsure if Ziggy could travel, unsure if I even wanted the attention. But when I asked him softly, as if he could decide, Ziggy thumped his tail and nudged my hand as if to say, "We've come this far. Let's go the rest of the way." Backstage at the ceremony, I found myself surrounded by faces that felt familiar, even if I'd never met them. A group of veterans approached, their eyes carrying the same weight I knew too well. One, a woman with a service dog at her side, gripped my hand. "Ziggy's story. It's ours too," she said. "My dog got me through nights I didn't think I'd survive." Another vet, older with a cane, nodded. "You're giving us a voice, Gomez." I swallowed hard, glancing at Ziggy, who sat calmly beside me, his presence steadying my nerves. Their words hit me deep, like I was part of something bigger than myself, something Ziggy had started. I didn't know how to respond, so I just said, "He's the one who does the saving." They smiled, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. The night of the ceremony, the theater was full, hundreds of guests, bright lights, music, and emotion in the air. When Ziggy's name was announced, the room erupted in applause. He stepped onto the stage beside me, his gait uneven but proud, the light catching the healed scar along his shoulder like a badge of honor. People stood, applause turned to cheers, some wiped away tears. I adjusted the microphone, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. "He was forgotten in the backyard," I began, my voice clear. "But he never gave up on me. He waited, he forgave, and when it mattered most, he gave again." That is what love looks like. That is what loyalty truly means. There was no sound in the room for a beat, then a thunderous standing ovation. A few days after the awards, a letter arrived from a nonprofit asking me to join a campaign to fund service dogs for veterans. They wanted Ziggy's story to lead it, to inspire donations that could change lives. Sitting at the kitchen table, I read the letter twice, my coffee growing cold. Part of me imagined helping others find what Ziggy gave me, a reason to keep going. But another part, the quieter one, looked at Ziggy dozing in a patch of sunlight and wanted nothing more than these simple days. Could I step into that spotlight again? I scratched Ziggy's ears, his tail thumping softly. "What do you think, buddy?" I asked. He lifted his head, eyes clear, and I knew the answer would come, just like it always did, with time and with him. Later that night, far from the stage and cameras, Ziggy and I returned home. The house was still quiet, still familiar. We walked out to the porch as the sky burned with sunset. Ziggy lay down slowly, resting his head on my boot, breathing deep and steady. I reached down and stroked his head. No words were spoken. None were needed. The final light of day stretched across the yard, casting two shadows side by side, one man, one dog, watching the world we had saved and been saved by. On the screen, in silent text, the words appeared. They were never just a soldier and a dog. They were the parts of each other that war couldn't take. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey, a story of loyalty, survival, redemption, and the unshakable bond between a soldier and his best friend. Ziggy was more than a dog. He was hope with four legs, a quiet hero who waded through silence and rose when it mattered most. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, cry, or believe in second chances again, I invite you to be part of something bigger. Subscribe to Amazing Paw Stories for more true emotional tales of animals who save us in ways we never see coming. Give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment to tell us how Ziggy's journey moved you, and share it with someone who could use a reminder that love, loyalty, and healing often come with a pause, because here at Amazing Paw Stories, every paw has a purpose, and every story has the power to inspire millions. We'll see you in the next one. Would you like to hear more stories about veteran dogs like Ziggy? If so, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next veteran dog stories.